This video is brought to you by Aura. More on them later. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a phenomenal series that I absolutely adore. This show has so many amazing episodes, not you, that showcase this exhilarating journey that our characters partake in. They meet amazing characters, not you, who shape our protagonists to be who they are, and ultimately visit breathtaking locations, not you. Well, this is pretty breathtaking. In this video, I'll be remastering Avatar: The Last Airbender's lowest rated episode, according to both IMDb and IMO, titled The Great Divide. But this episode, although my least favorite one, is one of the more fun ones to remaster, mainly because of how different the styles are that are portrayed during these flashback story sequences. So before we get started with The Great Divide, let me tell you how you can greatly divide your risk of your personal information getting out there with this video sponsor, Aura. A few months ago, National Public Data announced that they had suffered a major breach which compromised over 2.9 billion records used for background checks, including personal information such as full names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, and most importantly, social security numbers. Personal information security is such an important topic in this day and age, and we're all more vulnerable than ever in today's digital landscape. From having too much information online to receiving spam calls and texts daily, all of this can get extremely overwhelming to deal with. Thankfully, I feel secure because of today's sponsor, Aura. Aura not only monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to alert you about potential identity theft, but they also provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance in case the worst happens. Plus, Aura offers a variety of other features to keep you safe online, including real-time alerts for data breaches, a VPN for secure browsing, data broker opt-out to stop companies from selling your personal information, a password manager to help you create and store strong passwords, and much more. I don't feel comfortable leaving myself vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, click the link in my description or you can go to aura.com/chunnyk to try 2 weeks for free. That will allow Aura to help you find out if any of your personal data is exposed. We're going to be moving around a lot in this video since there's a good amount to cover, but I know that I can't do a remaster of The Great Divide without actually showing this amazing big division. For our first attempt, we'll be working on this panning shot of the gang overlooking this honestly beautiful canyon as it sits front and center. I initially tried to draw the side and shimmy it along frame by frame because I thought Momo moving throughout the screen would be a bit of a headache to maneuver around. However, I realized that I wouldn't be able to move the entire image due to the parallax effect happening from the foreground to the background, so I had to go about this in a slightly different way. I opened a new illustration canvas and isolated the cliff area so they can move around independent of the background. Then I worked on the environment to fill out areas where the cliff would be moving around. After all that was done, all I had to do was plop the background illustration over the original 4x3 clip, and then place the cliffs over that. Some annoying keyframing later, and it was looking somewhat acceptable. The next thing I had to work on was adding Momo back into the picture. This was another tedious process where I had to isolate his body in the frames, and then plop that back into the animation. This whole thing took me quite a while, but I'm glad I did it this way instead of doing a simple panning shot over a still image, which granted would have been way easier and a lot less time consuming, but it probably wouldn't have looked as good. Now that we got a good view of the exterior of the canyon, let's move towards the interior. In this part of the episode, the gang is accompanied by two separate groups that absolutely hate each other. And honestly, same. I did something similar to the previous process where I created a separate illustration layer to both stitch the first and last frames together, and then to also add my drawing on top to complete the widescreen transformation. When the 4x3 became squared, it was time to plop this image back onto the animation canvas so I can use the keyframe tool to pan downwards. Now normally I would consider this done, but unfortunately in the original shot our characters are shown walking throughout, so I knew that I had some more work to do. I pretty much spent the next bit of time making sure our group was doing their cardio, and this was a pretty tedious process that I'm just going to gloss over so we can move on to the next portion of our remastering attempts. We're going to zoom all the way in onto the trail to get a closer look at the back of Katara's head, and also the rest of the crew. POV, you're walking down the Great Divide to avoid the Fire Nation. This thankfully was a scene that had no movement on the side, so it's as simple as can be. I just needed to fill in the sidewall of this rocky canyon, and I used a mixture of the soft and noisy airbrush to kind of get a similar look to the canyon, although I don't think I was able to replicate it exactly. Anyways, while this side gave me some issues, the back of Katara's head was a million times easier. I quickly filled out the inking and the coloring before moving onwards. Of course, this wouldn't be a video about Avatar without showing some bending on the screen. In this part of the episode, our group has finally reached rock bottom, physically, to avoid anyone following them, like maybe the Fire Nation. The Earthbending tour guide launches a boulder to remove any easy trails leading to their location. As you probably saw, I used the frame to make the frame. Doing it this way is a lot easier and quicker since I don't have to really create everything from scratch. The next section was literally more of the same. Using the original frame, I quickly got the sides done. Where it differs, however, is once the boulder makes contact with the path, I have to work on the shaking of the screen as the path gets destroyed in the process. Then I work on adding the remains of the dust that settles from this attack. Speaking of dust, just like how fire is always followed by smoke, Earth is always followed by these huge clouds of dirt and dust. As annoying as it was having to draw this smoke, it was equally nice not having to fill out the rest of the environment since I knew that it would get covered anyways. There's not much left to say here, so let's just skip on ahead to the leader of the Ganjin providing some much unneeded exposition before we transition to an equally unneeded flashback. This scene is slightly different from the usual panning shots that we work on. Instead of moving up or down or left or right, this one is moving diagonally. What a time to be alive. I thought about the different ways to tackle this scene, but I ended up creating a new illustration layer to stitch these frames together. Then I worked on filling out the remaining spaces to make a huge canvas for me to pan, without worrying about frame-by-frame matching. The only issue is our old man is a yapper, so I knew that I had to find a way to add his talking into the scene. The easiest way I found was to mask out his separate expressions and add them on top of my base illustration. I did a test run without the panning to see how it turned out, and I thought it looked pretty fine. Now that that was taken care of, the panning was easy using just a camera 2D layer and the keyframe tool with a smooth interpolation. And I think it's been enough time to showcase what we've done so far. This episode is well regarded as one of the worst episodes in the series, but I completely agree. However, I don't think the episode itself is terrible. It's not great, but the reason I don't like it is the amount of times I would come home from school and turn the TV on to watch this show, only to have reruns of this exact episode playing literally every time made me grow to hate it. But on a positive note, I will say that this episode is visually spectacular with the canyon scope and detail. Also, if you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, please give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more, but let's get back into it. Moving on, we go to a simple panning shot. This one has no movement happening at all, so I didn't have to worry about any masking or frame matching. I just had to stitch the first and last frames and then work on the sides and then keyframe it downwards. The protagonist of this story features Jin Wei, a man tasked with transporting a sacred crystal orb from one gate to the other as some sort of tradition or whatever. In this scene, we have our man running towards the gate as is his duty. There may be some movement happening in this scene, but since it's solely focused on the center of the frame, the sides were just still images for me to work on. Unfortunately, it's not completely still since near the end there is some zooming action happening. This one, however, didn't really bother me like the other ones because although there's a pretty significant zoom, which would usually mean me having to alter the image and match the frame to an annoying degree, this one happens so fast and the zoom seems to be pretty loose, I didn't really have to worry about things lining up perfectly. On the way, Wei Jin gets in Jin Wei's way, and he loses possession of the sacred holy crystal orb. Due to this horrific act, Jin Wei is forced to flop so hard that it'll make Marcus Smart blush. This was a mild scene to remaster due to the action happening solely on the center of the screen. All I had to do was focus on the trees, the shrubs, and the ground. Simple and boring, which I'll gladly take. Finally, we'll have something to do animation-wise in this next segment with Wei Jin's disgusting act of kleptomania. All I had to do besides filling out the background was to draw in the glow emanating from the sacred crystal orb, and again, simple and boring, which I have no problems with. Now that we got the Ganjin's lies out of the way, it's time to show the story from the Jang's point of view. I had to do something similar with the leader of the Ganjin, but this time I also had to draw in another character on the side here. I knew that it would be a pretty quick pan, so I didn't focus on giving this guy too much detail. I then used the illustration layer to stitch everything together. I'm glad this one came second because there's definitely a lot more going on in this short clip compared to the Ganjin one. But after getting most of the empty spaces taken care of, I was finally able to use this image as a base for me to mask over the different expressions and mouth movements. While this may seem like an annoying process, it was kind of relaxing and I didn't mind it so much. Once I finally finished everything, it was time to do the panning. I ended up not using the additional random character that I created, so all that work was, I guess, for nothing. But let's look at what I've done so far with the second grouping of clips. The ironic part of this video is the part I enjoy animating the most is actually the part I like watching the least when watching these episodes. I really wasn't invested with these backstories of the two warring clans, and these flashbacks honestly just didn't do it for me. But this next segment that we're animating had me faced with a tough decision. I knew that I normally add onto the sides in this remastering series, but because of how warped this image looked, I was debating between doing what I usually do or stretching out the image to make it even more wacky. So I do what I normally do when faced with a fork in the road. I went down one way, decided I didn't like it that much, then went back and went the other way. Ultimately, I thought that the stretched out version looked better since the non-stretched one kinda had the gate squished in the middle with these empty spaces on the side, but let me know if you think the other way looks better or not. This next one is for all of you feet lovers out there since Jin Wei's got his dogs out. Or is it Wei Jin? I don't know, I'll just call both of them Wei to simplify things. This animation style is immediately different from what we're used to, and it's such a breath of fresh air. I didn't mind doing any of these frames even when we got to the zooming, which I usually can't stand. But this one was so much fun because of how simple the lines were, and the main fact that each zoomed frame is inconsistent with one another, which is a pretty good thing for this art style in my opinion. So this threw the pressure of having to perfectly match everything completely out the window. Now that I had a general inking all done, it was time to run through each frame again, but bring some much needed color to these sides. And this right here is Wei doing his best Patrick Mahomes during the Super Bowl impression, as he's signaling for help from Wei. But first, to remove that constrained feeling of the 4:3 aspect ratio, I split the video like I was Jim Carrey in Bruce Almighty. Or I guess I could just go with the source and say Moses and the Red Sea. And then instead of manually adding each tree in the white space, I pretty much just copy and pasted. But that doesn't mean I let the Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V do all the work. I still had to use my brush to fill out any inconsistencies with the trees and the clouds, so I guess it's not 100% laziness. This orb is really getting all the attention with these two guys fighting over her, and I don't blame them, this orb's got curves for days. Anyways, we have the tiny Wei running towards our orb here as I fill out the sides. This is another scene where the sides remain completely still, so although it seems like there's movement happening, I don't have to worry about it. Wei must have been the star on his cross-country team because he's still running from one clip to the other. I know that I've said this already, but there's just something about this art style that's just such a joy to work on. You know what, maybe this episode isn't so bad after all. I'm gonna go through this section pretty quickly because honestly the drawings themselves were pretty quick as well. There was minimal movement if at all happening on these side borders, so besides adding these very cartoonish trees, there wasn't anything left for me to do. Luckily for my boredom, we move onto a sequence where there's a bit more work to do than your normal static images. I had to work on these soldiers sliding their way onto the frame, and if I wanted to do this a proper way, I knew that I had to work on completing the background as our base first, and then working on masking out the 3 different guards. The first one wasn't too bad since his entire body is in frame and I just had to mask him. The second one had some minor work to do like filling out the remaining missing pieces. And finally, the third one was a bit more involved due to his sword attack animation that I had to fill out. And it was a pretty simplistic art style, so it was pretty quick and pretty fun to complete. I think it looks pretty good. I'm saying the word pretty way too much. I think it looks good. Now we're nearing the end, and I did originally plan on doing a bit more in the final section, but I actually ended up hurting my back during soccer, or I guess football for the rest of the world. And due to that injury, it was actually very uncomfortable for me to be in this drawing posture for too long, so that's why there's only 2 more quick scenes left for us to go over, and they're pretty much the same thing. Both are clips that I red seed down the middle, and I just filled in the blank spaces, and that's pretty much it. Let's take a look at what we've done in this video. I know that it's been quite a while since I posted one of these remastering videos, but truth be told, I was getting a bit burnt out on them, which is kind of why I've been taking breaks and been doing these fun drawing challenge videos to improve on my art, and because it's been, pretty fun and I do enjoy it. I also have been getting extremely busy with my full-time job that I haven't had too many opportunities to, actually sit down and crank one of these out. Especially because these remastering videos do take a good amount of my time, and I really just didn't have too many to spare. But hopefully I can do some more in the future, we'll just have to see. And as I mentioned, I couldn't really do everything in this video, especially because my back started hurting a lot and I just couldn't really be in that drawing posture for too long. At the very least, I'm happy that I was able to at least cover the visually distinct moments of the show. But yeah, if I would revisit this episode, I would want to try to tackle the 2 clans fighting each other, or both groups fighting the creeper crawlers, or even Aang fighting his stomach. But alas, I'm okay with what I was able to capture. I did feel quite rusty in this video, and I'm hoping that the end result still looked quite good. But yeah, at the very least, I think that it looks pretty decent. Let me know down below what you think of it. I know I mentioned other drawing videos I've done, and I'm gonna shamelessly plug them right here, but I recently started doing a drawing my way through the alphabet video, obviously starting with the letter A, and that's been so much fun, and I do plan on going all the way to Z. Hopefully I can see some good improvement, so please check that out if you have the chance. Or if you want to see some more Avatar related contents, I did do a video where I expanded on the original concept drawing of Avatar, and that was also a lot of fun, so please check that one out if you can too. That being said, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.